I've had plenty of questions over really the last little while asking about HRV, or what we know as heart rate variability. So today I just want to give a couple of my quick thoughts, break down what HRV actually is. So what are we monitoring and measuring? And is it something that I think is worthwhile looking at long-term in your training, in your recovery, to make sure that you are adapting and ready for each of your sessions appropriately. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. Nick here, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Thanks to everyone who's already been subscribing to the channel. We're getting very, very close to 2,500 subscribers. Really want to hit that benchmark, ideally before the end of the year, and I think it's definitely an achievable goal. So share this video with someone that you think might be interested in the channel and might want to subscribe. Or if you're watching this and you've been enjoying the content so far, or you're watching for the first time, consider hitting that subscribe button down below. Join the great community we got growing here. Plenty of great content coming out in the next little while, and it's going to be the best way for you to keep up to date with what's going on. If you've got a specific question you want to ask, and some of the questions around HRV that I've had over the last while is what has sparked this video in particular. So if you do have any questions about anything in particular around sports science, endurance, head over to Instagram. I'll leave it in the bottom corner here at NJ_sportscience. Head over there, give me a follow, but then also send me a direct message with your questions. Always looking for new ideas and different content to create specific to what you want to learn and what you want to know. But also, it's probably a question that someone else is wanting to be asking or thinking, and they just haven't got around to it as well. So get your questions in over there. Always happy to open the discussion up. And yeah, let's get into today's content, which, as I said in the introduction, is all about heart rate variability, or what we know as HRV. It's a metric that has popped up, I think, in terms of endurance. And when I say mainstream metric, when I talk about a mainstream metric, things like heart rate monitoring, pace, power for bikes in particular, but now also power for running. All of these things that we sort of, I guess, see day to day. It's very consumer. You're able to go out and purchase a device from a store that will allow you to monitor and track some of these things. Heart rate variability is something that I think in endurance terms is starting to become, a lot of people are starting to become a little bit more aware of it because of companies like Whoop. So the Whoop band is a really interesting one, the Oura Ring as well. Apple Watch, for example, I'm wearing an Apple Watch here that allows me to also track heart rate variability to an extent. So there's all of these different consumer devices that allow us to track this new metric, and I think that's why it's becoming a bit more, I guess, having greater awareness. The thing with it, though, is it's not necessarily a new methodology. We've seen it in sports science and strength conditioning practices for quite a long time. The US has been a big adopter of it with different implementations and different methodologies of tracking it in teams and things like that over quite a number of years. And it's not necessarily a new metric or technology. It's just become a little bit more accessible and available, which to one point is really, really good. The fact that we're able to access a bit more in terms of the sports science space, a little bit more information and data, is always something that is going to be interesting, and it allows us to innovate the endurance industry. Having said that, it's the type of thing that we need to be aware of. What are we actually measuring and monitoring to then be able to get meaningful insight from the data we're collecting? Because otherwise, if we're just collecting numbers for the sake of it, it's not really doing what we're aiming to do. We're trying to collect information to be able to make decisions based on that information to make our training and preparation a lot better and a lot more effective. So as a fundamental perspective, heart rate variability is the variance or the changing, pattern between heartbeat. What does that mean? The heart doesn't beat regularly like this. It's not on a metronome, if you like. As intensity goes up, as we are working a little bit harder, yes, it starts to get into a bit more of a pattern like that, where we are going to have a bit more regularity to it. Same goes for when the body's under a lot of stress. What we have is called the sympathetic nervous system. The body's under that sort of, I guess, trying to put itself in a bit of protection mode, trying to recover, things like that. We go into this mode where the heart will beat a bit more regularly. But normally, the heart beats quite irregularly. So at rest right now, my heart will beat. There'll be a little bit of a pause. There'll be a beat again, and then it might be another quick beat after that. There's a bit of variation, and what we ideally want is a larger variation. We want the heart to be a little bit more sporadic in terms of how it's beating, and not be on this metronome type style. Because what that's also going to do is typically have a much lower heart rate, but also it typically signals what we call a parasympathetic nervous system, which is more of that relaxation and recovery state, rather than the sympathetic, which is more of what we call a fight or flight response. It's when you're training and competing, or when you're a bit stressed and your heart rate's elevated a little bit, you're a bit agitated, a bit anxious maybe, those types of things are a bit more of a negative response when we're trying to really repair and recover and allow all of our energy and time to go into the process of adaptation, allowing our body to reset itself ready for another training session. So all we're looking for is the variability. Low variability in heart rate at resting, not so great. It means the body's struggling to recover. Maybe we need a bit more recovery time before getting into our next hard session. high amount of variability, a little bit better. That's a very simple way of looking at it. Everyone's slightly different in terms of their band of where they sit, whether they're up at something like 80 milliseconds, whether they're right down at 20 milliseconds. There is a bit of variance individually, so you need to have a little bit of time to, one, assess where your baseline is at. Be able to go and use it, implement it throughout your week, have a look at what your heart rate variability is doing through some common training weeks, then see how that tracks over time as you increase volume or as you increase the amount of intensity you incorporate into your week over time, to be able to understand, all right, what number makes sense for me, because not everyone should be having the same heart rate variability. Everyone's slightly different. Their genetics, the way that the nervous system innervates the heart, etc., is all going to be a little bit sort of different. So keep that in mind. You shouldn't necessarily have the same HRV as the person that you train with or someone that you know. It might be similar, but it shouldn't really be within the same ballpark if you are quite different. If you are exactly the same, if you're a twin, for example, maybe you do. But there should be a little bit of variance there, mainly because we're all quite different in terms of how we've adapted, how our body is like, genetics, the way the nervous system works, etc. Outside of that, do I think it's worthwhile, and probably the last thing I'll touch on today, do I think it's a worthwhile metric to look at? I think it's useful, but it's the type of thing that, like any metric, you need to make sure that you actually are going to look at it and implement it. I've had a look personally into things like the Whoop device, into the Oura Ring. I think it's an interesting set of technology, and again, the greater accessibility I think is something really exciting for me as a sports scientist, to be able to see, all right, more people can have access to some of this technology and understand a little bit more about their data, about what their physiology is doing, things like heart rate variability. Maybe it informs our decisions better for then preparing for training sessions and backing up after hard sessions. Great. But if you're just going to collect the data and then not look at it, well, I then kind of go, what's the point in us having that device in the first place, or having this information, if we're not going to change any of our practice? Even if you collect the data and look at the data, then just do the same thing anyway. Again, what is the point in where we're going with this? The real thing is, if you're going to look at the data and use it as a guide to maybe monitor training load, rather than maybe basing your decisions on TSS, or maybe basing your decisions on feel in terms of fatigue after a session, and working out, okay, I need a bit of extra recovery, I can afford to push a little bit harder here. You want that objective measure. Maybe this is a better way to go about it for you. Have a look at, all right, what is my heart rate variability doing? Is it on the improve? Okay, now I can start to push a bit harder. Is it not really improving? Okay, maybe I need a bit extra recovery. That's a meaningful insight. But again, we need to look at it over a long period of time so we can get a baseline and see where those clear changes are happening as well. Hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into HRV, my thoughts. Very base level here. I'm not going super in depth today because it's something that I'm learning and growing with as well. And I hope you can sort of join me on that process. And as I start to learn a bit more and help to share that with you, implement it myself. It's something I'm starting to look at just with my own day-to-day recovery processes. And as I sort of get a bit more aware of how I'm using it, how I think it's effective, that's obviously going to base sort of my decision making on how I implement it with athletes and the type of information that we can share and sort of learn off together. Have any questions about HRV specifically, please leave them in the comments down below. Always happy to help, happy to look into it a little bit further and do that digging and that investigation. Reason why I covered it was because I've had quite a few questions about it and more people starting to become aware. So if there are others who want to learn a bit more specifically about HRV, happy to do the videos dedicated to that. Happy to answer a little bit more in a live stream as well if you want to join us and get your specific questions answered, whether it is on heart rate, whether it's on another component of sports science or the science of endurance. Jump on our live streams Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Melbourne time. Taking all of your questions, nothing's really off limits. We jump on for about an hour or so, talk through, have a good discussion, and hopefully help a few people on the way. The replays are always up, so you can go check those ones out as well. As always, continue to support the channel by subscribing, but also share this video with someone you think is going to get something out of it. Let's grow this community, get to 2,500 subscribers before the end of the year. I definitely think it's something we can do. We are not far off at all. If everyone on this channel shared it with one person and they all subscribed, or even half of them subscribed, we'd be way over 2,500 very, very easy. We'd be up close to sort of 4,000 if that sort of happened, which would be absolutely unreal. Let's keep growing this great community. Hopefully you got something out of today's video. I'm going to leave it there. That is it for today, and we'll see you in the next one.